for historical perspective, we go to our good friend, Hoover Institution research fellow and author, Bruce Thornton. Professor, welcome back.
Thanks, Crane. Good to be with you.
Now, your article is a must-read for anyone to see how this policy or policies like these have impacted us. And it's entitled Our Bad Habit of Negotiating with Terrorists. Now, I am going to play for you a clip that speaks to the administration defending this policy. Is Susan Rice being asked about the policy and if it will encourage others, terrorist organizations, to take hostage American and American soldiers. Here is part of the exchange she had with Candy Crowley on CNN. And real quick, Candy Crowley had an outbreak of journalism. Roll it.
Point blank, did the U.S. negotiate with terrorists for his release?
Candy, what we did was ensure that, as always, the United States doesn't leave a man or a woman on the battlefield.
Right.
And in order to do this, it's very important for folks to understand, if we got into a situation where we said, you know, because of who has captured an American soldier on the battlefield, we will leave that person behind, we would be in a whole new era for the safety of our personnel and for the nature of our commitment to our men and women in uniform.
Sure.
So because it was the Taliban that had him did not mean that we had any less of an obligation to bring him back.
Right. I mean, in fact, it was the Haqqani Network, which really is listed as a terrorist, and this is not a judgment question. It's just a question. You had to negotiate with terrorists to secure the release of the sergeant.
We actually negotiated with the government of Qatar, to whom we owe a great debt. But the point is, he was being held by the Taliban. We had the opportunity to bring him back. He's back safely in the hands of the United States, and that's a great thing.
That no longer can it be said that the U.S. doesn't negotiate with terrorists.
I wouldn't put it that way, Candy. I wouldn't say that
How would
at all.
you put it?
Well, when we are in battles with terrorists and terrorists take an American prisoner, that prisoner still is a U.S. serviceman or woman. We still have a sacred obligation to bring that person back. We did so, and that's what's to be celebrated.
Professor, did we negotiate with terrorists?
Man, where to start with that? He wasn't captured in battle. He walked off of his post. His colleagues who were there with them at the time, and this has been known since 2012, they interpret his actions as a desertion of his post. And he went over to the enemy, who then took him, a gift that dropped in their lap, and used him as a hostage in order to get something they wanted, which was infinitely more important, 5 high-level, high-risk. When they say high-risk detainee, that's their code for wants and will and has killed Americans. And let's not forget that when he walked off that base, not kidnapped while on patrol, not getting lost while on patrol, walked off that base, and the subsequent search for him took the lives of 6 other Americans. For Susan Rice to pretend like he was a casualty in a battle, right?
Yes.
A prisoner of war, or you know, what most people mean when they say leave no man behind, they mean when you have a battle and you have somebody wounded, and even if there's just his body, you have an obligation as far as possible to try and retrieve him or retrieve the body. That's not what we're talking about here, and that's a shameless misuse of that phrase, leave no man behind. You want a real example of that, go back to the Black Hawk Down Mogadishu incident, when they were not leaving that kidnapped pilot behind in a combat situation. This was nothing other than a negotiation with terrorists that main purpose, I believe, its main purpose was to distract us from the VA scandal, from all the other scandals, to have a brief, feel-good reunion, mom, dad, et cetera, et cetera. And one last point. For her to say we don't leave people behind. They left 4 people behind in Benghazi. And then she went on TV and lied about it. So this is really, really, I think, a disgusting, despicable display by Susan Rice.
Are you surprised at the brazenness of this type of announcement in light of the fact of what you just said and the context surrounding it?
No. You know, they're like the guy who murders his parents and then throws himself on the mercy of the court because he's an orphan. You know, they are shamelessness incarnate. They don't care. They are utterly and completely political, and they will say and do anything for political gain. And I think they've gone far beyond any standards of decency in terms of the office they hold and the responsibility that they hold.
In light of history, let's go back to what you start out in your article highlighting Jimmy Carter dealing with the Iran hostage situation. 444 days, 52 Americans, and what so many of us remember, or we go back in history and can cite, is that the election of Ronald Reagan, peace through strength, originally Eisenhower, obviously with that, is bringing the hostages home. Tell me, what should we know about the hostage situation and Carter, what he tried? Because I learned a lot in your article from that, by the way. So tell us what we don't know about that, Jimmy Carter's attempts.
Exactly, and that's part of the, again, I've said to you and before, I mean, I'm a great admirer of Ronald Reagan, and sometimes his fans go a little too far. Those hostages were released because Jimmy Carter signed executive orders freeing up the funds and assets, Iranian assets in American banks, and indemnifying the Iranians from any further lawsuits resulting from destruction of American property, businesses, and the treatment of our diplomats. And that was the main thing. The other reason was they had served their purpose as far as Khomeini was concerned. And that purpose, as I point out, was to humiliate the great Satan, the United States. Right? That was really what it was all about, and to humiliate Jimmy Carter personally. And once that was done, they were through. They picked up their ransom payment. Right now, if somebody wants to argue that they feared that maybe Ronald Reagan would be a little bit more aggressive in attempting to free the hostages, don't forget the second example I used, IranContra.
Yeah, IranContra. Why don't you go right to that? Because this, again, we're taking the politics out of it, and I want to know what these policies yield because I want to know what to expect, and that's what you're really doing. You're preparing us for that as you did with your book, but go ahead.
Well, the IranContra was a wacky kind of scheme that the United States, contrary to an arms embargo on Iran, would first to the Israelis, then directly sell advanced weaponry, TOW anti-tank and other missiles, anti-missile, to the Iranians, right? In exchange for the release, there were 7 Americans held hostage. The profits then would go to fund the Contras fighting in Nicaragua because the Boland Amendment had forbidden the United States to fund them. So it was this three-way, one of those, cockamamie schemes that sounds like a good idea. The problem with it was these were the Iranians who had trained the terrorists, funded the terrorists, supported the terrorists, as they have to this day, and murdered 241 of our military personnel in Beirut, right, just a few years earlier.
Right, Hezbollah.
And so, I mean, I want everybody to think about this. This is the state that has explicitly attacked your citizens, attacked your country, has said that you're the great Satan, that says that, you should be destroyed, all that, actively training people to kidnap and murder your citizens. And you're going to sell them weapons to get some hostages released. Sure, 3 ended up getting released, Hezbollah immediately kidnapped 3 more. And that's really the point, is we call it moral hazard. When, you pay a hostage taker, you guarantee that he will take more hostages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened in that situation. So it was really contributed to, and I think this is the larger point that we have to keep in mind here. It contributed to the damage to American prestige in the region that started in the region. That didn't start altogether. That goes back to Carter in Vietnam and, abandoning South Vietnam. But in that region led to the belief on the part of all these various jihadist outfits that are springing up that the United States may have military power, may have economic power, but as bin Laden says, it's a culture with foundations of straw. You send body bags home, you kidnap their citizens, you murder their citizens, everybody will get all excited and upset, and they will do anything in order to keep that from happening, which, of course, only guarantees that it will continue to happen. It created the perception that Obama has worsened to the nth degree, that we are weak, that we can be played, that we can be had. And that's what's dangerous, on danger that far exceeds even, that another American might be kidnapped and held for ransom, which I expect to happen. It's this whole 30-year-long decline in the perception of American power and will and spine that has caused us so many problems in the Middle East today.
And in that light of understanding what our enemy sees, you're saying, bottom line, like in what you cited from bin Laden, I believe he also, if not your reference, but also in his 1996 letter, which is a must-read, he details exactly what the policy that we're talking about yields,
Mm-hmm.
and it portrays us as the weak horse. And
exactly.
we haven't really focused in on that because we have ideas like this that were mentioned by the president in his West Point speech. I got this for you. Roll it.
I believe in American exceptionalism with every fiber of my being. But what makes us exceptional is not our ability to flout international norms and the rule of law. It is our willingness to affirm them through our actions. And that's why I will continue to push to close Gitmo, because American values and legal traditions do not permit the indefinite detention of people beyond our borders. That's why we're putting in place new restrictions on how America collects and uses intelligence, because we will have fewer partners and be less effective if a perception takes hold that we're conducting surveillance against ordinary citizens.
You have to understand that when I watched this speech, I was so close to just calling you, but I knew you were out of town and traveling, but I thought wages of appeasement. Just every time I heard the president, your great book. Tell me something. This is the fundamental flaw of understanding us, what makes us great, and applying it to our enemies, thinking that if we just show them that we're okay, they'll leave us alone.
Well, notice, the key phrase to me is international norms. Mm-hmm. That's the key to the whole. That's the key to the whole problem. International norms. Notice what that implies. That implies that American norms established by our Judeo-Christian traditions, by our Constitution, by our policies and laws that are voted upon by free citizens, is somehow must be subjected to some vague, I believe, non-existent international norms. There are no international norms. Mm-hmm. This is the biggest fallacy of the foreign policy establishment. There are only treaties that nations sign with one another, or conventions that they sign on to, and they do it because they think it serves their interests. Let me give you a quick example.
Okay,
the
about 20
States
seconds.
wisely has not signed the Convention on Landmines. Now, Switzerland signs it, Burkina Faso signs it. All of these countries sign it because they have no global responsibilities that require landmines. So for them, yeah, sure, let's ban landmines.
Right. Bruce Thornton, we will continue this conversation Friday, if not sooner. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. AFR Talk.